You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood, art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted Weekly Art History for All Ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today we're diving into the enigmatic, sometimes chaotic, but always fascinating world of Willem de Kooning. Willem de Kooning was born in Rotterdam, Netherlands on April 24th, 1904. His early life wasn't easy. His parents divorced when he was young, and he was shuffled between them. While that home life may not have always been pretty, his art was. His artistic talent emerged at an early age. By the age of just 12, he was already apprenticing at a commercial art and decorating firm, learning practical skills like lettering and sign painting. At the same time, he attended night classes at the Rotterdam Academy of Fine Arts and Techniques. It was a prestigious institution where he received rigorous traditional training in drawing and painting. This classical foundation would actually underpin even his most radical later work. Young Willem was ambitious, but also restless. He dreamed of leaving the Netherlands to come to America, a land of opportunity, a bustling nation on the rise, putting up skyscrapers, inventing new styles with things like jazz. And for Willem, it was the land of artistic freedom. So in 1926, at the age of 22, he did something truly audacious. He stowed away on a British freighter bound for Argentina, jumped ship in Virginia, and made his way to Hoboken, New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan. He arrived with virtually nothing and speaking very little English. For several years, de Kooning supported himself the way many immigrants did, with grit and hard work at a variety of jobs. He worked as a house painter, a carpenter, a commercial artist. They weren't glamorous, but they did keep him connected with the craft of applying paint and understanding materials. He wasn't yet a part of the fine arts scene, but he was soaking up the energy of New York City. Things started to change in the 1930s. He moved to Manhattan and crucially met other artists who would become his friends, sometimes rivals, but also inspiration. Perhaps the most important early connection was with Arshile Gorky. Now, Gorky was another immigrant artist wrestling with European modernism, especially like influences like Picasso and Miro. And Gorky became a close friend and also a bit of a mentor figure. They shared ideas, studio spaces, and a passion for pushing artistic boundaries. He also met influential critics like Harold Rosenberg and Thomas B. Hess, along with fellow painters Jackson Pollock, Franz Kline, Barnett Newman. A major turning point came in 1935 when de Kooning joined the WPA Federal Art Project. Like many artists during the Great Depression, this government program provided him with a modest stipend and, more importantly, the freedom to focus solely on his art for the first time. He worked on murals, though many were never fully realized. This period allowed him to experiment and develop his style. De Kooning's early work shows a progression from figurative studies influenced by Ingres and that academic training toward increasing abstraction in line with modern movements like Cubism and Surrealism. But unlike some of his contemporaries who eventually abandoned the figure entirely for pure abstraction, de Kooning never fully let go. He famously said, quote, "Flesh was the reason oil paint was invented," end quote. By the late 1940s, he gained recognition for a series of black and white abstract paintings. Using inexpensive house paint, these works were economical but incredibly powerful, full of complex forms and energetic lines. They established him as a key player in the emerging Abstract Expressionist movement. It's also around this time, in 1943, that he married Elaine Fried, or I guess Elaine de Kooning, who was an important artist in her own right. Their relationship was passionate, complex, sometimes tumultuous, but they remained deeply connected throughout their lives. While many look at these loose brushstrokes and drips of paint as marks of confidence, boldness, or those who don't appreciate the work might see it as kind of careless, in reality, de Kooning was known for his intense self-doubt and relentless perfectionism. He would work and rework canvases endlessly, scraping away layers, painting over sections, sometimes taking years to finish a single piece. Friends would visit his studio and see a painting they loved, only to return later and find it completely changed or even destroyed. Now, just a side note, if you want to learn more about the destruction of Willem de Kooning's work, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to my episode on the lost masterpiece, Robert Rauschenberg's Erased de Kooning. But back to Willem. He was known to destroy, edit, and rework his paintings and drawings because he was constantly searching, never quite satisfied. The early 1950s brought his most famous and arguably most challenging body of work, the Woman series, which we'll get into later. This cemented his international reputation, but also sparked considerable controversy. He continued to explore both abstraction and figuration throughout his career. In 1963, he moved from the bustling city to Springs, East Hampton on Long Island. His later work often took on more lyrical quality, sometimes inspired by the light and the landscape of his new surroundings. Sadly, in his later years, de Kooning suffered from Alzheimer's disease. There's been debate about the validity of the art he produced during this period, but he continued painting up until the late 1980s. Willem de Kooning passed away in 1997 at the age of 92, leaving behind a powerful, complex, and enduring legacy as one of the 20th century's most influential painters. An immigrant who smuggled himself into the country and ended up redefining its art. Now, after a short break, we're going to take a closer look at Woman 1 from 1950-52. Welcome back. Let's take a look at one of Willem de Kooning's most famous pieces, and for those high school students across the U.S., a piece from the AP Art History curriculum. I'm talking about Woman 1 from 1950-52. It now hangs in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where it continues to command attention and provoke discussion. It's the first in a series of 6 numbered woman paintings he created in the early 1950s, plus numerous related drawings and studies. So let's start with just the process. Remember how I said he struggled and he was a bit of a perfectionist? Woman 1 is the ultimate example. He worked on this single canvas for nearly 2 years. Legend has it he painted and scraped it out perhaps hundreds of times. His wife, Elaine, described finding stacks of sketches related to it. The art critic, Harold Rosenberg, famously coined the term action painting, partly inspired by de Kooning, describing the canvas as, quote, an arena in which to act, end quote. Now, looking at Woman 1, you feel that action, the physical struggle, the layers of paint, and the revisions seemingly visible beneath the surface. Apparently, he almost abandoned it, but his friend, the art historian Meyer Shapiro, encouraged him to keep going. So why would he keep going and persist when it was such the struggle? De Kooning himself gave various hints. He said he drew inspiration from contemporary images of women, maybe pinup girls or the smiling women in advertisements he had seen, but he also looked much further back. He spoke of being influenced by ancient fertility figures like the Venus of Willendorf or Mesopotamian idols, figures representing raw, primal female power. And of course, he was engaging with the long, often idealized history of the female nude in Western art. From Titian to Ingres to Picasso, he wasn't just painting a woman. He was wrestling with the idea of a woman, both ancient and modern. And in this, we see something that is somewhat terrifying, but also alluring in some ways. Some also speculate about the influence of his own complex relationship with women, including his wife Elaine. As we look at the canvas, it's a large painting, about 6 feet tall. The central figure dominates. It's pressed forward in the picture plane. But her form is aggressively distorted. I mean, it's huge, vacant-looking eyes stare out. A wide, almost ferocious grin reveals just menacing teeth. The breasts are large and somewhat crudely defined, and her limbs just merge with the turbulent background. The brushwork is incredibly energetic and visible. We see slashes, drips, thick patches of paint, that heavy impasto, or, that's the term for that thick textured paint. De Kooning uses vibrant, almost garish colors. We see these fleshy pinks, acidic yellows, harsh greens, alongside black outlines. There's no traditional modeling or sense of depth. The figure and the background just fuse together in a chaotic swirl of paint. The overall effect is just raw energy, this psychological intensity that feels almost violent. It's not a pretty picture, but it's not meant to be. When Woman 1 and the subsequent paintings in the series were first exhibited in 1953, the reaction was just as intense. Many abstract expressionist peers who championed pure abstraction were shocked and felt de Kooning had betrayed the movement by returning to the figure in such a confrontational way. Critics and the public were also taken aback. Some saw the painting as brutally misogynistic, violent attacks on women. De Kooning, however, defended the piece, suggesting he was simply grappling with a subject that had preoccupied artists for centuries, injecting it with modern anxiety and energy. He famously said, quote, "It's not about the woman, it's about the paint," end quote. Of course, I would argue when you call the painting woman, it's at least a bit about the woman. Now, if we're looking at the significance of this piece, I mean, obviously it has psychological resonance, and I think it is, at least in part, a reflection of not only de Kooning's misogynistic leanings, but a reflection of the society and the culture that it came from. It's also a landmark work of abstract expressionism, proving that the movement's energy and psychological depth could be applied to the figure, not just pure abstractions. It challenged conventional notions of beauty and the tradition of the female nude. It cemented de Kooning's reputation as a major, albeit controversial, force in the post-war era. The painting embodies that action painting ethos, the canvas as a record of the artist's struggle and process. Despite, or perhaps because of, its difficulty and ambiguity, Woman 1 remains a hugely influential work, forcing viewers to confront complex issues about representation, gender, art history, and the very nature of painting. It's a painting that doesn't offer easy answers. It demands our attention and forces us to think about how we're reacting to the subject, the paint, the mixed feelings that are coming through the canvas, and our own reaction to it. Let's be real, it's kind of an ugly painting, but it's also a provocation. It forces us to confront some ugly realities that exist in our world, and hopefully something beautiful can come from that.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.